We need to consistently remember that during any change, an individual will need to unlearn an old way of behaving or doing something and adopt new behaviors or learn the required skills for the change to be successful. To help think about the stages an individual will go through when learning a new skill, the conscious competence learning model helps demonstrate these. Within a change situation, the process can begin with unconscious competence in the old business-as-usual world. The learner is then precipitated into conscious competence as a result of the change. Through training, the learner achieves unconscious competence once again. Once the learner is comfortable in the new way of working, they move into unconscious competence. The most common used analogy is driving. When we're unconscious in competence, we see people driving. We don't know how to do it. We might be fed up with local transport and think it must be easy. Lots of people do it. How hard can it be? Then we have our first driving lesson and we move into conscious incompetence. We learn about mirror, maneuver, the highway code, and lots of other things we did not realize just by watching. Once we have learnt the necessary skills to take our driving test, we pass the test, but every time we drive, we are still thinking about the gears, mirror, maneuvers, and this is when we're conscious competence. Then we get to the point when we drive somewhere and we think to ourselves, I do not even remember how I got here, and voila, we are unconscious competence. Just take a moment to think about the last time you learnt something new. You may even be feeling it right now about this training. How did it make you feel in each of the different stages? Which two stages do you think require the most amount of hard work, and as change managers, we would need to be mindful about with the learners? Yes, I'm sure you're right, the middle two. The period of focus, conscious incompetence and conscious competence, can be a period of anxiety for the learner. The fear of failure is most acute here, and the ghosts of past learning experiences may come back to haunt. We need to make sure that the learner does not go back to the old way of doing things, and that we understand the potential challenges and do what we can to mitigate these and support the learner. We have just looked at the learning process described in the conscious competence learning model and spoken about the period of focus on conscious incompetence and conscious competence. It is important to recognize that this process has implications on job performance too. The skilled performance or mastery associated with unconscious competence is fluent and quick. Errors may be frequent. As soon as the learner must pay conscious attention to the skill, and especially before basic competence is achieved, productivity declines and error rates climb. There is a significant fall in job performance. Therefore, when planning change that will involve people in learning new skills, where they have previously been highly competent, a learning dip such as this must be expected and planned for. The extent of the dip and the speed with which recovery takes place will be a function of the timeliness and effectiveness of training provision. We have looked at how people learn. However, what are the key principles of learning? Take a moment to read the key principles. As you may well know, writing good learning objectives is a skill set. However, the heart of the matter is to be clear what the outcomes must be. As Stephen Covey's second habit suggests, begin with the end in mind. Writing good learning objectives means completing the following sentence, or variants of it. At the end of the learning activity, learners will be able to... This sounds simple, but often requires considerable thought. The following is an example of a knowledge-based learning objective. At the end of the training, the driver will be able to correctly identify the meaning of and correct response to all road signs within the territory of the license that affect motor vehicles. The following is an example of a skill objective. At the end of the training, the driver will be able to perform basic safety checks on the condition of the vehicle. There would be a separate document that lists what the checks are. The following is an example of an attitude objective. At the end of the training, the driver will consistently show appropriate caution when performing maneuvers. The learning to drive example illustrates, for one learning activity, there are usually several specified learning objectives. It is often a good idea to ask someone to look at the learning objectives once written to see if they understand the desired outcome and cover the key principles.